Edward Pentin is joining us from the National Catholic Register, praise be to God. He is also an author of a book that we've discussed on this program before, of The Next Pope, and we're glad to have him back on the show. Good morning to you, Edward Pentin.
Good morning, Joe.
Praise be to God. Thank you for your time. Megyn Kelly of Fox News fame, now independent, of course, but she's stirring up lots more rumors in the Eternal City. And this was we had rumors a couple weeks ago, but now they're back. And the Pope announced that he wanted to go visit Pope Celestine V in August. So people like Megyn Kelly are out there saying big things are happening. What is going on with this story?
Well, it's all speculation, Joe. There's no real concrete evidence that the Pope is actually going to resign. In fact, those closest to him have denied this. People like Cardinal Rodriguez Maradiaga has said that there's no possibility of him resigning at the moment. And so the reason why it's taken off is because, of course, Pope Celestine was the last Pope to resign. He's going to go to his birthplace of L'Aquila at the end of August, which is something that Benedict did only a few years before he resigned. And so that's obviously set off a lot of speculation that he might resign, especially in view of his deteriorating health. He can't walk at the moment. He's always in a wheelchair, and he has a serious complaint with his knee, which medical doctors say is more than just a knee complaint. It actually probably relates to something more serious.
Oh, wow. I found it amusing that, I don't know if you saw Megyn Kelly's video that she put on her Twitter feed, but she referenced all these cardinals that were walking around. And I thought, it's the Vatican. I mean, you probably see cardinals there all the time.
Right.
But, I found it kind of amusing, funny, innocent in some ways. Like, golly gee whiz, do we just assume that because cardinals are around, big things are happening? But it's like the World Meeting of Families was kicking off today, wasn't it?
That's right, and there's also, I think, the Brazilian bishops are in Rome, so they've been there for the ad limina visit. So there's lots of bishops and cardinals around, but as you say, that's pretty normal for the Vatican, of course. And so yes, I think that's a simple explanation for it.
And I know it is speculation, but what is your opinion of this? Do you think Pope Francis would entertain a retirement either this year, next year, something like that? Do you think he's thinking along those lines, or do you think he may stick around longer than we expect?
Well, we've been here before, Joe. He's often said over the last 9 years that he intends to possibly resign. He says this at a time when he's either wanting to push through more reforms, or it's just a general sort of attempt, it seems to me, to sort of galvanize his base so that they push forward his reforms more quickly, and at the same time, in a certain way, placate the opposition so that they think he's not going to be around for much longer. So I think this is all part of that, and I don't actually think he probably will resign. I may have to eat my words about that, but I think at the moment, I think he's not really, as people often say, he's not the resigning type. I think he's somebody who will want to stay in this position for as long as he can, and I don't think he'd want to resign under any circumstances, really. Yeah.
I'm with you. I don't see it. I don't think he's going to resign. Of course, I don't know. I don't have no special knowledge, but my money says he's probably going to stick around, and we'll see how that goes. But let's switch subjects here. There was a headline that kind of started making rounds around the internet, especially among Catholics. First gay blessing in Italy, Diocese of Italian bishops as president. So this is Cardinal Zuppi's diocese, and he was just named the head of the Italian conference, if I'm not mistaken. What's going on there?
Yes, well, this is a ceremony that took place on June the 11th. It was a civil union between two guys who had a same-sex civil union, and then they went to a church in the Diocese of Bologna, which is the Diocese of Cardinal Zuppi, for what was called a Mass of Thanksgiving, but it had all the appearances of a blessing. And so it had this sort of, so it got the headlines that this was the first same-sex blessing in Italy, in the Diocese of Cardinal Zuppi, who was informed about it and knew all about it and didn't stop it. Now they insist that it wasn't a blessing of the couple as such; it was a blessing of the group they belonged to, which they claim is simply trying to accompany and support homosexual couples in the church. But there's an article out today by this Catholic newspaper which broke the story, La Nuova Quotidiana, saying that actually these are untruths that the diocese is putting out, that it wasn't a Mass of Thanksgiving. It had very much the appearance of a blessing, but it was given that title in order to circumvent the church's rules on this. And that this group that they belong to is more than just supportive and accompanying homosexuals. It actually is part of a activism group that is pushing the LGBT agenda in Italy. So yes, it's quite a big scandal, and I think the fact that Cardinal Zuppi is behind it, who's also sort of papabile and is sort of a leading rising star in the College of Cardinals. That obviously makes it even more of a story.
What do you think would happen if Zuppi were to be elected the next pope? How do you see that being played out, given that this is something he's okay with and seemingly endorses?
Well, I think it would be a sort of a continuation of what we've seen in the past 9 years, and I think although he's popular in the sense that he's friendly to all groups as well as traditionalists and others. I think he would very much be a continuity candidate of the Francis pontificate. And as I put in my book, The Next Pope, he is very much a sort of archetypal modernist. He's somebody who will certainly try to accommodate the church into the world and try to make the church more like the world in a sense. And so I think that would be the sort of pontificate we'd have from Cardinal Zuppi. He's also very close to the Sant'Egidio community, which has a lot of influence in Italy and further afield, which is very much a sort of left-leaning lay organization within the church.
Mr. Pentin, we're coming up against a break here, but I just want to ask you now, you have a sort of an inside look as to how these things happen. I'm just wondering, how do these rumors of someone being papabile come around? Do the Cardinals talk about this in the open, or is it just an open secret? What do you say?
Sure. Well, it's really whether they sort of fulfill the three offices of bishop primarily, whether they have a certain charism when it comes to teaching and governance and sanctifying, those three elements of the bishop's office. But it's also a sense of whether they have a certain following, whether they have a certain group of people within their own country or further afield who actually, believe they have a certain charisma and they like to follow them, and that they have. As I say, a certain traction. That they really seem to be somebody who has these leadership qualities and could take them further as Pope. Now that doesn't qualify. A lot of bishops don't have that. They don't have, rather cardinals who don't have that, and so they don't sort of get to that sort of level of papabile. But there are many that do, and those are the ones that tend to get the headlines and then get a certain traction. So that's really the essence of how they become get rather into the public eye, and then it sort of goes from there.
Edward, all these cardinals that were just elected, I don't know almost any of them. I've never heard of these bishops before they became cardinals, and everybody's saying, okay, they're all very liberal bishops. They're all very liberal cardinals. We should be very worried. And were there any good cardinals that were put in? And also, I heard someone say, and I don't know if this is true, maybe you can clarify, that there were some people who were raised to the cardinalate that were not actually of voting age. So what would be the purpose of making someone a cardinal in that circumstance?
Well, that's a tradition that's been around for a long time, Adrian, in the fact that the popes have always chosen half a dozen or less cardinals who are over the age of 80, simply because of recognition for their distinguished service to the church, and so that's quite a long-standing tradition. But yes, the ones that were chosen, there are some which conservative. They often tend to be from Africa or the developing world. They tend to be more conservative. But this group, I think there are quite a few who are obviously of a liberal bent. Of course, Bishop McElroy is one of those of San Diego, but there are others as well. And there was also a bishop chosen in Mongolia, who's Italian, in fact, who the Pope only had met 2 days before and decided to make him a cardinal.
Wow.
Which is rather unusual. So it is quite an interesting group, but yes, as you say, most of them, I think, tend to be of the position of Pope Francis and tend to be pushing very much a sort of liberal, perhaps, as you could say, a heterodox agenda.
Does that change your assessments from your book whenever you were saying who you think are the most likely candidates for the future papacy?
Well, not as yet, because I think when they're just chosen, it's very unlikely that they'll become Pope in the next few years, because they're new cardinals. So it's unlikely that they'll reach that rank of papabile so soon. So it doesn't really change much to the choices that we've made in the book. Cardinal Zuppi, of course, is a relatively new cardinal, but he already had quite a following, and especially in Italy, and so he's risen up pretty fast. I think he was made cardinal in 2019.
I wanted to ask you, we covered a little while ago on the show, we covered the story coming out of Chicago with this same-sex couple giving the homily at a mass in Chicago under Cardinal Zuppi. And in America, this is a hot-button issue. America is deeply divided on all of this. I wonder, what is it like in Italy in particular? I was horrified last week to discover that there was Italians that were mocking Our Lady with that mannequin. It was so disgusting to me to see that. And I guess it bothers me more because I think of Italy as Catholic, whereas America has never been Catholic. Can you give me a sense of what the people in Italy are thinking about this issue over same-sex couples, the church, and all of the rest?
Well, you're right. It is more of a. There's more resistance to it, primarily because the family, even now, is still pretty much a unit, and it's not been affected in the sense that the family has in non-Catholic countries. But in Italy, it's still very much the mother is still very much revered as a matriarch figure of the family. But of course, they're not having children, and the population is decreasing. So there are other sort of threats to the family and to the faith as a whole in Italy. And the faith generally has become quite sort of ideologized. It's become rather left-wing in Italy, especially among the hierarchy, and so that has an effect as well. So there's been a steady secularizing trend in Italy. So it's not the Catholic country that it was, even though there's certainly elements and residue of Catholicism and Catholic culture in the country still. So I think that's perhaps the main reason. The other interesting point about the church in Italy is that it's very much an established church in Italy. So it's very much a sort of automatic cultural element to the country's sort of social fabric, but it doesn't. That doesn't mean that many people actually believe in it, even though they may go to mass every Sunday. But it's very much a sort of cultural thing, and not necessarily all that alive, I would say.
Let me ask you, let's switch subjects over to another story that you've been covering, and one that I think is also, the world is waking up to some issues. Just this morning we were reading that in Israel there was a study out with like 7 doctors or something. There was vaccine-related injuries there, and they're finding more and more problems. But what's going on in Italy with vaccine-related injuries?
Yes, well, this is a conference held in Italy this week about there's 1,800 cases of vaccine injuries, and this conference was actually held to draw attention to that by a group called Ascoltami, which means listen to me, and it's really to try to draw attention to these cases of adverse effects, which are not a small number, and but they haven't really been talked about because it's been a sort of taboo. There's a sort of rule that you can't talk about this because we have to fight the disease and the pandemic, and everyone should get vaccinated. And the rules were really quite severe in Italy. They were very. I mean, you even fining people over 50 years old if you didn't get a vaccine.
Wow.
And so it was very much, as people have said, it was rather a blackmailing situation going on where you had to get vaccinated. But now we've got all these adverse effects coming out, and people are starting to talk more and more about them, and to try to get the state to recognize the situation and provide compensation if necessary.
Yeah, I mean, the study out of Israel was about male fertility rates being down significantly. Then there's the sudden adult death syndrome that's been coming up in the news lately. And then, of course, all that myocarditis. I mean, even in the UK, I think they admitted that there was a connection there.
And Justin Bieber getting sick, his wife.
Well, that's not been admitted publicly that that's related. But, I mean, there's the palsy symptoms that we've seen really. I was just thinking about that, too, remember in the early days, all of those pictures of the people from the UK with palsy symptoms in that first round? Mm-hmm. I mean, it's appalling. The world rushed to these things so quickly, and so many are now left to sort it out for the rest of their lives. Do you think that at some point we'll be able to have a legitimate critical conversation and find some way of dealing with this? Or do you see a trend here that continues? Because we're probably going to get some pushback just even having the conversation while streaming this on social platforms. How do you see that going, Edward Pentin?
Right. Well, it's hard to say, but I think it's interesting that there's certainly in Britain the trending topic on Twitter the last week has been vaccine injuries. So this issue is getting more and more coverage and exposure. So I think, excuse me, I think as that continues, I think that's likely to increase. And but I think what's also interesting is the Church's silence in this, unfortunately. And I think there's been concerns here that the Vatican particularly has led the way in pushing the vaccine and not recognizing any of these adverse side effects. Excuse me. And I think the Vatican has only just lifted the restrictions on having to be vaccinated to enter the Vatican. That's only been lifted since the 1st of June. So the fact that the Vatican has not really led the way, in fact, led the way in the opposite direction, I think has led governments as well, perhaps subconsciously, I don't know, not to actually bother too much about the moral aspects to this, and the fact that there are many people who've been adversely affected by the vaccine, and there's been no real justice for them.
Yeah, it is. It's pretty peculiar and bizarre times. We're not allowed to have conversations about certain subjects without getting our hands slapped. And yet we're seeing so many problems, as you've just communicated. We're down to the wire here with Edward Pentin. I want to encourage everybody to check out his book, The Next Pope, The Leading Cardinal Candidates. It really is a great way to sort of wrap your mind around how the church chooses the next man in the hot seat there, and who are the leading contenders for that. You can find his book on Sophia Institute's website, sophiainstitute.com. Edward Pentin, thank you for your time today. We're very grateful to you.
Thanks. Good to be with you.
God bless you. Have a great day. That is going to do it for the first hour. If you can join us in the next hour, we would love to have you. Our friend and a political advisor, analyst, attorney, and Catholic speaker, Brent Haynes, is going to be on the program. He's going to be live from Washington, D.C. They just ordained a bunch of men there. We're going to talk about that. But also, what's going on in the Supreme Court? All that and more is coming up in the next hour. We'll see you then. God bless you. God love you.